I have always seen the world differently than most people. When other students look at a face, they see eyes and a nose and a mouth arranged in a configuration that their brain labels as human. When I look at a face, I see the architecture. I see the sharp ridge of the zygomatic bone creating shadows under the eye socket. I see the delicate curves of the philtrum that connects nose to lip. I see the way light pools in the hollow of a throat or how a jawline creates a geometric plane that changes with every degree of rotation. It is not a choice. It is not something I can turn off. My brain has been wired since birth to deconstruct and reconstruct everything I see into lines and shadows and compositions. My mother used to tell me that I was born with charcoal under my fingernails. She was probably right. I am Jade. I am 22 years old. I am a disaster of a human being. My hair is a mass of dark curls that I usually tie back with whatever I can find, which is often a paintbrush or a piece of string. My clothes are permanently stained with acrylic and oil and charcoal dust. I have paint under my fingernails that will never come out no matter how hard I scrub. I am a senior at the university studying fine arts with a concentration in drawing and painting. My professors tell me I have talent. They also tell me I lack focus. They say my technique is flawless, but my subject matter is scattered and unfocused. They say I need discipline. They say I need to find a singular vision. They say I need to find a muse. What they do not know is that I already found her. I found her on the first day of the fall semester. It was a Tuesday, September 3rd. The weather was still warm, but there was a hint of autumn in the air that made the light golden and soft. I was running late because I always run late. I burst into lecture hall 4B with my bag half open and papers falling out behind me. The hall was already full. 300 students sitting in ascending rows, all facing the front. I mumbled apologies as I climbed over backpacks and legs to find an empty seat in the back corner. I finally collapsed into a chair in the last row by the window. I was sweating. I was out of breath. I pulled out my sketchbook and a stick of charcoal and tried to look like I had my life together. That was when she walked in. The room fell silent. It was not a gradual quiet. It was instant. 300 voices stopped mid-sentence. 300 pairs of eyes turned to the front of the room. She walked down the center aisle towards the podium. She was tall. She moved with a deliberate grace that suggested every step was choreographed. She was wearing a charcoal gray suit that fit her perfectly. Tailored jacket, straight pants, a white silk blouse underneath. Her hair was dark and pulled back into a severe bun at the nape of her neck. She was wearing glasses, black frames, simple, elegant. She carried a leather briefcase in one hand and a coffee cup in the other. She reached the podium. She set down the briefcase. She took a sip of coffee. She looked up at the 300 of us. Good morning. I am Dr. Elena Cross. This is Advanced Art History 412, Italian Renaissance. If you are not supposed to be here, I suggest you leave now. Her voice was low and clear. It filled the entire space without her needing to shout. It had a texture to it, like dark chocolate or aged whiskey. It was the kind of voice that made you lean forward to catch every word. No one left. She smiled. It was a small, controlled smile that did not reach her eyes. Excellent. Let us begin. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a remote. She clicked it, and the screen behind her lit up with an image of a painting. The Birth of Venus. Botticelli. She began to lecture. I do not remember what she said. I do not remember a single word of content from that first lecture. All I remember is watching her. I watched the way she gestured with her hands when she spoke. Long, elegant fingers cutting through the air to emphasize a point. I watched the way she paced slowly across the front of the room. Measured steps, never rushed. I watched the way she would pause mid-sentence to push her glasses up the bridge of her nose. I watched the way her jaw tensed when a student asked a question she deemed stupid. I watched her, and I understood what it meant to be utterly consumed by another person. When the lecture ended, I sat in my seat long after everyone else had filed out. I stared at the empty podium. I felt like I had been hit by a truck. That night, I went back to my apartment and I opened my sketchbook to a fresh page. I picked up a piece of charcoal, and I drew her. I drew her from memory. The line of her profile, the severe bun, the glasses, the way she held the chalk. It was rough, it was imperfect, but it was a start. I told myself it was just an exercise, just practice. Every artist needs to practice drawing faces. It meant nothing. But the next class, I sat in the same seat in the back corner. And I watched her again. And that night, I drew her again. And again. And again. 3 months later, my sketchbook was no longer a sketchbook. It was a shrine. It was a catalog of obsession. It was page after page after page of Dr. Elena Cross. I drew her lecturing. I drew her drinking coffee. I drew her walking across the quad. I drew studies of her hands, close-ups of her eyes, the curve of her neck, the line of her collarbone visible above the neckline of her blouse. I drew her from every angle I could observe from the back row of the lecture hall. I told myself it was academic. I told myself I was studying human anatomy, improving my portrait skills, learning to capture likeness. But you do not spend 3 hours shading the hollow of someone's throat if it is purely academic. You do not draw someone's hands with that level of tenderness if you are just practicing technique. The truth that I did not want to admit even to myself was that I was in love with her. I was in love with a woman who did not know my name, a woman who was 16 years older than me, a woman who was my professor, a woman who was completely and entirely out of my reach. So I drew her, because drawing her was safe. Drawing her was private. Drawing her was a way to hold her without ever touching her. It was a perfect system, until it was not. It was late November. The semester was winding down towards finals. The weather had turned cold. The trees were bare. The sky was gray and heavy with the promise of snow. We were in the smaller studio annex for a practical session. Dr. Cross had agreed to guest lecture for the figure drawing seminar, even though it was not technically her course. The professor who normally taught it was out sick, and Dr. Cross had volunteered to cover. The studio was a large open room with concrete floors and high ceilings and huge industrial windows that let in cold, gray light. There were easels arranged in a circle around a raised platform in the center of the room. A life model named Gregory was sitting on a stool on the platform draped in a white sheet. Gregory was in his 40s, balding, slightly overweight. He was a fine model, adequate bone structure, decent musculature, but he was boring. I set up my easel in the far corner of the room. I liked the corner. It gave me a wall at my back and a view of the entire space. I arranged my charcoals and my kneaded eraser and my blending stumps on the little shelf attached to the easel. I flipped open my sketchbook to a fresh page. Dr. Cross stood at the front of the room by the windows. She was wearing a navy blue velvet blazer over a cream-colored blouse. Her hair was in its usual severe bun. She was holding a piece of white chalk. Today we are going to focus on hands. The human hand is one of the most complex and expressive parts of the body. It is also one of the most difficult to draw convincingly. Pay attention to the bone structure, the tendons, the way the skin stretches over the knuckles. She turned to write on the blackboard. She wrote the names of the bones: metacarpals, phalanges, carpals. As she wrote, I watched her hand, her own hand, the way her fingers gripped the chalk, the delicate bones of her wrist, the way her sleeve pulled back slightly to reveal the pale skin of her forearm. It was perfect. The light from the window was hitting her at an angle that created a rim light effect on the edge of her hand. The shadows under her knuckles were deep and rich. It was better than Gregory. It was 1,000 times better than Gregory. I looked at Gregory. He was scratching his nose. I looked back at Dr. Cross. I made a decision. I flipped to a new page in my sketchbook. I picked up a stick of soft charcoal, and I started to draw. I drew her hand, but I could not just draw the hand in isolation. I needed context. So I drew her wrist, her forearm, the cuff of her blouse, the edge of her blazer. And then, because I could not help myself, I drew her profile. The line of her jaw, her neck, her ear, the loose strand of hair that had escaped from the bun. I worked quickly. I was in a trance. The charcoal moved across the paper like it was being controlled by something outside of me. The rest of the studio faded away. The scraping of charcoal on paper, the quiet murmur of students, the ticking of the clock on the wall. It all became white noise. There was only her. Only the image of her that I was trying to capture. I was shading the curve of her ear when I became aware of a presence behind me. I did not hear footsteps. I did not hear breathing. But I felt it. A shift in the air. a change in the atmosphere, and then I smelled it. Sandalwood. Old books. Something faintly floral that I could never identify. It was her perfume. I had memorized it after 3 months of sitting in the same room with her. I froze. The charcoal stopped moving. My hand hovered above the paper. Slowly. So slowly. I turned my head. Dr. Elena Cross was standing directly behind me. She was less than a foot away. So close I could see the weave of the velvet on her blazer. So close I could see the individual lashes framing her dark eyes. She was not looking at me. She was looking at my sketchbook. She was looking at a drawing of herself. Time stopped. My heart stopped. My lungs stopped. The entire universe contracted down to this single moment. The silence stretched. It was not a comfortable silence. It was the silence of a bomb waiting to explode. I waited for her to yell. I waited for her to demand to know what I was doing. I waited for her to call me out in front of the entire class. But she did not yell. She reached out one hand. Her hand. The hand I had just been drawing. She placed her fingers on the edge of my sketchbook. May I? It was not a question. Her voice was soft, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. I could not speak. My vocal cords had seized. I nodded. A tiny, jerky nod. She picked up the sketchbook. She lifted it off the easel and held it in both hands. She looked at the page, the drawing of her by the window. Her face was completely neutral. It was the expression she wore when she was analyzing a painting in a museum. Clinical, detached, assessing. She tilted her head slightly. She studied the line work, the shading, the composition, and then she turned the page. My stomach dropped through the floor. The previous page was a drawing of her from last week. She had been standing by the door talking to a student. She was laughing. It was a rare moment. I had captured the way her eyes crinkled at the corners, the way her mouth opened in genuine joy. She stared at it. Then she turned another page. A drawing of her hands holding a coffee cup. Another page. A sketch of her in profile during a lecture on Caravaggio. Another page. A study of her eyes. Just her eyes. Staring out from the paper with an intensity that had taken me 2 hours to achieve. She flipped through my entire sketchbook. Page after page after page. Every single one was her. Different angles, different expressions, different moments, but all her. The other students in the studio had stopped working. They were watching. They could sense something was happening. The air was thick with tension. Dr. Cross finally stopped flipping. She closed the sketchbook. The sound of the pages coming together was soft, but it echoed in my ears like a door slamming shut. She held the book against her chest. She looked at me. Her expression was still unreadable, but her eyes were not neutral. They were dark and deep and searching. You have a very singular focus, Jade. It was the first time she had ever said my name. I had not realized she even knew my name. My voice came out as a croak. I'm sorry. She tilted her head. Are you? I did not know how to answer that. She tapped the cover of the sketchbook with one finger. I will need to keep this, for evaluation. My heart sank. I need to review the work. I will return it to you on Friday, during my office hours. 4 p.m. It was not a request. It was an instruction. She tucked my sketchbook under her arm, against her side, held in place by the pressure of her elbow against her ribs. Then she turned and walked away. She walked back to the front of the studio and continued the lecture as if nothing had happened. I sat frozen in my chair. My hands were shaking. I stared at the empty easel in front of me. She took it. She took my sketchbook. She took every secret I had been keeping for 3 months. And I had no idea what she was going to do with it. The rest of the class passed in a fog. I heard nothing. I saw nothing. When the session ended, I packed up my supplies in a daze. I walked out into the cold November air. The panic did not hit me until I was halfway across campus. What had I done? What had I done? I had drawn my professor, obsessively, without her knowledge or consent, for 3 months. I had documented her every movement like a stalker. and now she had the evidence. But it was worse than that, because I knew what was in the back of the sketchbook. The drawings in the front were bad enough. They showed obsession, fixation. But they were technically just observational studies. I could claim they were academic. I could claim I was practicing portraiture. But the back, the last 20 pages of that sketchbook were not observational. They were fantasies. I had drawn things I imagined, things I wanted, things I dreamed about in the dark hours of the night when I could not sleep because my mind was full of her. I had drawn her in settings I had never seen. In her apartment, in her bedroom. I had imagined what her bed looked like, what she looked like when she woke up. I had drawn her with her hair down, something I had never actually seen. I had drawn her wearing soft clothes, a sweater, bare feet. I had drawn her looking at me with an expression I had invented in my desperate imagination. I had drawn us together, me and her, in a kitchen, at a cafe, in a park, holding hands, touching, smiling at each other. I had drawn her kissing me. If she saw those drawings, she would not think I was a diligent student. She would think I was obsessed, dangerous, a stalker. She could have me expelled. She could file a report with the university. She could get a restraining order. She could ruin my academic career with a single email to the dean. I spent the rest of Tuesday in a state of paralyzed terror. Wednesday was worse. I did not go to class. I could not face her. I stayed in my apartment and stared at the wall. My roommate asked me what was wrong, and I told her I was sick. It was not technically a lie. I felt sick with dread. Thursday, I tried to go to class, but when I reached the door of the lecture hall, I turned around and walked away. I could not do it. I sat in the library and stared at a book without reading a single word. Thursday night, I did not sleep. I lay in bed and stared at the ceiling and imagined every possible terrible outcome. She was going to call me into her office and tell me I was expelled. She was going to bring it to the dean and I would have a hearing. She was going to laugh at me. That last one was somehow the worst possibility. The idea of her laughing at my pathetic longing made me want to die. Friday arrived like an executioner. I got dressed in the cleanest clothes I owned, a black sweater, dark jeans. I tried to make my hair look presentable, but it was hopeless. I stared at my reflection in the mirror. I looked like a ghost. Dark circles under my eyes, pale skin, hollow cheeks. I walked across campus through the cold drizzle. The sky was gray, the trees were skeletal. Dead leaves plastered to the wet pavement. It felt apocalyptic. I reached the humanities building. The hallway smelled of floor polish and dust. I walked past the glass cases full of ancient pottery, past the busts of dead philosophers mounted on pedestals. Plato, Aristotle, Socrates. They stared at me with blank stone eyes. I reached her door. The frosted glass panel was etched with black letters. Dr. Elena Cross, Professor of Art History. I stood there for a long moment. My hand was raised to knock, but I could not make myself do it. My knuckles hovered an inch from the wood. I could leave. I could turn around and walk away. I could drop the class. I could transfer to a different university. I could change my name and move to a different country and never draw again. But I needed to know. I knocked. 3 soft taps. Come in. Her voice was clear and calm. It gave nothing away. I pushed the door open. The office was exactly what I had expected. No, it was better than what I had expected. It was the kind of room that existed in my fantasies of academic life. The walls were lined floor to ceiling with bookshelves, old leather-bound volumes, art history texts, catalogs from museums around the world. There was a Persian rug on the floor in shades of deep red and gold. A large mahogany desk dominated the center of the room. Behind the desk was a tall window that looked out over the quad. The window let in weak gray light that was supplemented by a brass desk lamp with a green glass shade. Dr. Cross was sitting behind the desk. She was wearing a black turtleneck and her glasses. Her hair was down. Her hair was down. I had never seen her with her hair down. It fell past her shoulders in dark waves. It made her look different, softer, younger, more human. She looked up when I entered. She took off her glasses and set them on the desk. Jade, sit. She gestured to the leather chair opposite her desk. I walked forward. My legs felt like they were made of wood. I sat down on the edge of the chair. I put my bag on my lap and gripped the straps until my knuckles turned white. My sketchbook was sitting in the center of her desk. It looked ominous. A black rectangle. A bomb. Dr. Cross folded her hands on the desk. She looked at me. Really looked at me. Her dark eyes moved over my face. She was assessing me the same way she had assessed the drawings. Clinical. Thorough. The silence stretched. I could hear the ticking of a clock somewhere, the distant sound of rain against the window. Finally, she spoke. I read through your sketchbook. All of it. My stomach clenched. I looked at my knees. I'm sorry. The words tumbled out in a rush. I'm so sorry, Dr. Cross. I know it's inappropriate. I know I shouldn't have. It was just practice, just an exercise. I didn't mean anything by it. I can drop the class. I can transfer. I'll destroy all the drawings. Please don't report me. Please. Jade. I stopped talking. I looked up. She was watching me with an expression I could not read. Breathe. I sucked in a shaky breath. She reached out and placed her hand flat on the cover of the sketchbook. You have extraordinary talent. I blinked. That was not what I expected her to say. What? Your technical skill is far beyond what I typically see in undergraduate students. Your understanding of anatomy is flawless. Your use of light and shadow is sophisticated. Your line quality is confident and expressive. She opened the sketchbook. She turned to a page, the drawing of her hand holding chalk. Look at this. The tension in the tendons here, the way you captured the weight of the chalk, the pressure of the grip. This is not amateur work, Jade. This is professional level observation. She turned to another page, the drawing of her by the window, and here, the way you use the negative space around the figure, the way the light creates a halo effect on the edge of the hair. This shows a mature understanding of composition. She looked up at me. You asked me not to report you. But report you for what? For drawing. For practicing your craft. For being a dedicated student. I stared at her. But, I stammered. It's you. It's all you. It's obsessive. It's creepy. She tilted her head. Is it? Yes. She leaned back in her chair. She crossed one leg over the other. She picked up her glasses and put them back on. As an art historian, I have spent my entire career studying how artists depict their subjects. The male gaze, the objectification of women, the way women's bodies have been commodified and consumed by male artists for centuries. She paused. Your drawings are not that. She opened the sketchbook to a different page, the close-up of her eyes. When I look at this, I do not see objectification. I see someone trying to understand, trying to know. You did not draw me as a fantasy. You drew me as a person. You drew the lines around my eyes. You drew the imperfections. You drew me tired. You drew me annoyed. You drew me human. She looked at me. Do you know how rare that is? I shook my head. She stood up. She walked around the desk. She leaned against the front edge of it. She was close now. Close enough that I could smell the sandalwood. I saw the back of the sketchbook, Jade. My blood turned to ice. Here it comes. The disgust. The rejection. But she did not look disgusted. She opened the book to one of the fantasy pages, the drawing of her reading in bed. You have never been to my apartment. No. But you imagined it. Yes. She looked at the drawing for a long time. She traced the edge of the pillow with her fingertip. I don't have a lamp like this. I have a brass reading lamp, and my sheets are white, not cream. And I wear glasses when I read in bed. You did not include the glasses. She looked up at me. There was something in her eyes. Something warm. You drew me at peace. You drew me content. You drew me in a moment of private quiet. She turned the page. The drawing of us in the kitchen. And here. You drew us together. Yes, I whispered. You drew me making coffee. But I drink tea. And the anatomy of my arm here is slightly off. The angle of the elbow. She turned another page. The drawing of her hand in my hair. This one is interesting. The foreshortening on the arm is difficult and you handled it well. But the tension in the fingers is too high. If I were touching you, it would be softer. If. She said if. She closed the book. She set it aside. She turned to face me fully. Jade, why did you draw me? I looked at my hands. They were shaking. Because. I started. My voice cracked. Because I can't stop thinking about you. She waited. Because when you walk into a room, everything else disappears. Because I see you and my brain just immediately starts analyzing how to capture you on paper. Because you are the most beautiful composition I have ever seen. Because I think about you when I wake up and when I go to sleep, and every moment in between. Because I am completely and utterly in love with you, and drawing you is the only way I know how to deal with it. The words hung in the air between us. I had said it, out loud, the thing I had been hiding for 3 months. I waited for her to tell me to leave. I waited for her to tell me I was inappropriate, that I was a child, that she was my professor and this was completely unethical. But she did not say any of those things. She reached out, slowly, deliberately. She tucked a strand of my hair behind my ear. Her fingers brushed my cheek. The touch sent electricity through my entire body. I have been teaching for 12 years, Jade. I have had thousands of students. And in 12 years, do you know how many of them have truly seen me? How many? None. She leaned closer. Until you. My breath caught in my throat. Do you think I did not notice you watching me? Do you think I did not feel your eyes on me every single lecture? Do you think I did not see you in the back corner drawing while everyone else took notes? You knew. I knew. Why didn't you say anything? Because I was trying to be professional. Because you are my student. Because there are rules. Because I am 16 years older than you. Because I convinced myself that it was one-sided. That you were just a student with a crush. She picked up the sketchbook. She held it up. But this is not just a crush. This is devotion. This is 3 months of careful observation. This is someone who sees me. Really sees me. And I have never been seen like this before. She set the book down. She took off her glasses and set them aside. She looked at me without the barrier of lenses. I cannot be your professor and also be the person I want to be with you. My heart stopped. What? The semester ends in 2 weeks. Final grades are due 2 days after that. After I submit final grades, I am no longer your professor for this course. The ethical issue resolves itself. She smiled. A real smile. Small but genuine. There is a cafe in the city. The lighting is terrible for portraits. Too much yellow. But the tea is excellent, and they have a corner table that is quiet. She pulled a piece of paper towards her. She wrote something on it, an address. She tore off the paper and held it out to me. Meet me there. 2 weeks from Saturday. 2 p.m. I took the paper. My hand was shaking so badly the paper fluttered. She reached out and steadied my hand with hers. And bring your sketchbook. I have many corrections to make. Your imagination is vivid, but your facts are wrong. If you are going to draw me in my home, you should probably see it first. I stared at her. Are you saying? I am saying that I am tired of being observed from a distance. I am saying that I would like to be drawn from life, properly, with correct lighting and accurate detail. She squeezed my hand. I am saying that I would very much like to know what it is like to be someone's muse. I could not breathe. I could not think. The entire world had turned inside out. She let go of my hand. She picked up her glasses and put them back on. She became Dr. Cross again. Professional. Composed. You should go. I have papers to grade. I stood up. My legs were shaking. I picked up my bag. I picked up my sketchbook from the desk where she had left it. I walked to the door. I opened it. Jade. I turned back. She was looking at me over the top of her glasses. Don't be late. I value punctuality. I smiled. I couldn't help it. A wide, stupid grin. I won't be. I walked out of the office. I walked down the hallway. I walked out into the cold November rain. I did not care that I was getting wet. I did not care that my hair was plastered to my face. I did not care about anything except the piece of paper in my pocket with her address on it. I looked at my sketchbook. The black cover was damp from the rain. I opened it to the last page, the blank page waiting to be filled. I knew exactly what I was going to draw next. I was going to draw her real apartment, her real morning routine, her real life. And this time I was going to get every single detail correct, because this time I would not be drawing from imagination. I would be drawing from life. My professor found my sketchbook. Every page was a drawing of her, and in 2 weeks I am going to start a brand new sketchbook. This one will be a collaboration, the artist and the muse, finally on the same page.